The last statements were dated the 30th of November, 2008, and they were, as always, immaculate. Across roughly 4,800 client accounts, they showed a combined balance of just under $65 billion. Pensions, university endowments, charitable foundations, the life savings of families who believed they had done the sensible, conservative thing. 11 days later, the man who issued those statements was in handcuffs, and the world learned what the paper was actually worth. There were no holdings behind it. There were no trades behind it. Investigators combing decades of records would find no evidence that the investment business had ever bought a single share for its clients. There was one bank account, money flowing in, money flowing out, and a locked floor of a Manhattan office tower where a small staff manufactured $65 billion of fiction on an aging computer. It was the largest Ponzi scheme in history, and the man who ran it was not a fringe operator or a boiler room hustler. He was Bernard Madoff, a former chairman of the NASDAQ stock market, a pioneer of modern electronic trading, a fixture of regulatory panels, a philanthropist. A man the Securities and Exchange Commission consulted about how markets should work. And that is the real subject of this video, not the money, the machinery of trust that carried it. Because one investigator proved the whole thing was impossible in about 4 hours of mathematics, put it in writing to the regulator again and again for the best part of a decade, and was ignored until the scheme died of natural causes. This is the story of the two businesses that shared one building, of a strategy that was really a story, of the floor nobody visited, of the quiet analyst in Boston who did the sums, and of one week in December 2008, when the arithmetic that builds every Ponzi scheme turned round and killed the biggest one ever built. Because this is not really a story about greed. It is a story about verification, the dull, unglamorous act of checking, and about what happens to money when nobody does. Start with the respectable half, because without it the fraud is unimaginable. Bernard Lawrence Madoff was born in Queens, New York, in 1938, the son of a family whose own small brokerage ambitions had come to nothing. In 1960, aged 22, he founded Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities with around $5,000 saved from working as a lifeguard on Rockaway Beach and installing garden sprinkler systems. Helped along by a loan from his father-in-law, an accountant named Saul Alpern. Hold on to that name. The father-in-law's client list is where the poison first enters the well. The young firm could not join the club. The New York Stock Exchange of the 1960s was a closed shop of old names and expensive seats. So Madoff went where the club was not, the over-the-counter market, the chaotic bazaar of smaller stocks traded by telephone. And there, he did something genuinely visionary. He embraced screens and automation before almost anyone else, helping to build the electronic quotation systems that evolved into the modern NASDAQ. He pioneered a practice called payment for order flow, paying retail brokers a small fee to route their customers' orders to his desk. Controversial then, controversial now, but legal and devastatingly effective. By the early 1990s, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities was one of the largest market-making firms in America, reported at times to handle several % of all the trading in New York-listed shares. His brother Peter built the technology. In time, his sons, Mark and Andrew, ran the trading floor. It was a real business, employing well over 100 people, making real profits, executing real trades by the million. And the establishment that had once excluded him now garlanded him. Madoff served 3 terms as non-executive chairman of the NASDAQ stock market in the early 1990s. He sat on industry committees. When regulators wanted to understand how trading actually worked, Bernie Madoff was one of the men they telephoned. Remember that when we get to the part where the regulators are warned about him, the watchdog had been taking obedience lessons from the burglar. In 1987, the firm moved into the Lipstick Building, the elliptical red granite tower on 3rd Avenue in Manhattan. The geography of that building is the geography of the crime. On the 19th floor, the trading operation, screens and noise and family. On the 18th, technology and administration. And on the 17th, a floor with restricted access, an old IBM computer, and a separate staff who did not mix with the traders upstairs. The entire investment advisory business, the part of the empire that supposedly managed billions for clients. The traders on 19 did not work there. Even within the firm, the 17th floor was a sealed compartment. Run by a man named Frank Di Pasquale, a Queens fixer with no formal financial training who had joined the firm in 1975 and risen to become the fraud's chief engineer. Here is what clients were told happened on that floor. Madoff claimed to run a strategy called a split-strike conversion, and part of his genius was that this is a real strategy used by real managers. You buy a basket of 35 or so of the largest American stocks, closely tracking the S&P 100 index. You sell call options above the market price, surrendering the big upside in exchange for income. You use that income to buy put options below the market, a floor under your losses. A collar, modest gains capped and cushioned. In honest hands, it produces unspectacular, slightly choppy returns. In Madoff's telling, it produced roughly 1% a month, 10 to 12% a year, decade after decade, through booms, crashes, wars, and recessions, with barely a losing month. When markets looked dangerous, he said, he simply stepped aside into treasury bills. The story was calibrated perfectly. Not the 50% promises of a huckster which attract suspicion, but the steady hum of a machine. Returns just good enough to be irresistible, and just modest enough to seem plausible. And here is what actually happened on that floor, typing. The trustee who later took the business apart and the staff who eventually confessed described the mechanics plainly. No securities were purchased. Client money went into a single account at what became J.P. Morgan Chase, account number ending 703, and sat there until someone wanted money out. The 17th floor generated trade confirmations after the fact, using published historical prices, choosing from the day's trading range with the benefit of hindsight. Because the statements were printed after the market had already moved, Madoff's fake trades could be as clever as he liked. It was choosing lottery numbers after the draw. The floor's defenses went further. Programmers built systems that could generate whole libraries of fake records on demand. And when outside reviewers came to check, the 17th floor could produce counterfeit reports mimicking the paperwork of the market's central clearinghouse. When did it start? Madoff insisted the fraud began in the early 1990s. Prosecutors and investigators traced its methods back to at least the 1970s. And the truthful answer is that no one has ever found the bottom. One more detail, because it decides everything that follows. The secrecy was not just protection, it was the product. Madoff did not register as an investment advisor until 2006, and only then under pressure. He advertised nothing. Clients received paper statements by post, no electronic access ever. And investors were quietly warned that if they talked too much about being in the fund, or asked too many questions about the method, they might be shown the door. Think about what that rule does. It turns due diligence into a social offense. And it turns admission into a privilege, which brings us to the most elegant part of the machine, how the money came in. The first pipeline was family. Saul Alpern, the father-in-law, steered his accounting clients toward Bernie's remarkable returns. And his successors in the practice, Frank Avellino and Michael Baines, turned the trickle into an industry, informal notes promising fixed high returns, all of it funneled to Madoff. By 1992, they had gathered hundreds of millions of dollars from thousands of small investors, and the Securities and Exchange Commission noticed. Not Madoff, but them, for selling unregistered securities. Here is the moment that should stop your heart in hindsight. The SEC walked into the scheme 16 years before it collapsed. They examined the accounts, confirmed the money was managed by the respected Bernard Madoff, saw statements showing the returns were real, statements manufactured on the 17th floor, and closed the matter. Avellino and Baines were shut down and the money handed back. And much of that money, now personally acquainted with Madoff's wonderful returns, promptly reinvested with Madoff directly. The regulator had stood inside the fraud and mistaken it for the exit, and had accidentally run a recruitment drive for it. From there, the machine scaled through two channels, and the first was intimacy. Madoff worked the Jewish communities of New York and Palm Beach, the country clubs, the synagogues, the charity boards on which he served, including as treasurer of Yeshiva University. Investigators have a name for this pattern: affinity fraud that travels through the trust networks of a community, where a recommendation from your own people replaces every question you would ask a stranger. At the Palm Beach Country Club, membership seemed almost to come with an introduction to Bernie, and the psychology was exquisite because it was inverted. Madoff turned people away. He closed the fund, made exceptions, relented as a favor. Being accepted became a status symbol, and no one audits a privilege. The velvet rope did the due diligence's job backwards. The second channel was industrial, the feeder funds. Fairfield Greenwich Group channeled roughly $7 billion through its Century Fund. Kingate, Tremont, Banco Santander's Optimal Funds, J. Ezra Merkin's Ascot Partners, access international marketing to the old families and royalty of Europe. A global sales force gathering money and passing it to one man in New York. Many of their investors never knew Madoff had their money at all. And notice the strangest commercial arrangement in finance. The feeders kept the lucrative management and performance fees, while Madoff, supposedly generating the returns, claimed to be content with mere trading commissions. Professionals looked at the single most generous fee structure they had ever been offered and decided not to wonder why. It was a red flag disguised as modesty. Meanwhile, the entire edifice, a business claiming to manage what its statements said was tens of billions, was audited by Freeling and Horowitz, a storefront accounting practice operating out of a strip mall in New City, New York, with 3 employees, one of whom was a secretary and another of whom was semi-retired in Florida. Some professional investors actually checked, discovered this, and walked away. The rest never looked. And the returns rolled on, serene through the dot-com collapse, through September the 11th, through everything. One feeder fund's Madoff portfolio would later be shown to have reported just 7 losing months in more than 14 years. That number should have emptied the fund. Instead, it filled it. But that number had, in fact, already been noticed, and this is where the story turns. Because in late 1999, in a mid-sized investment firm in Boston, a marketing colleague dropped a rival's return stream onto the desk of a quantitative analyst and asked, in effect, "This man returns 1% a month like clockwork. Build us one of these." The analyst's name was Harry Markopolos. And the second story of this video, the one running underneath everything you are about to see, is that the largest fraud in history was mathematically exposed 9 years before it fell, by a man nobody would believe. Markopolos later said it took him minutes to suspect, and about 4 hours of modeling to be sure. The reasoning was not exotic. That is the scandal of it. First, the shape. Madoff's return line rose at essentially 45 degrees, month after month, and nothing in markets moves like that, because markets breathe. Second, the correlation. A split-strike conversion lives inside the S&P 100, so its results must rise and fall dampened with that index. Madoff's returns barely correlated with the market at all. The strategy he named could not produce the returns he reported, like claiming a sailboat's course while showing a motorboat's wake. Third, and fatally, the size. To hedge the billions Madoff supposedly managed, he would have needed to buy more index put options than existed. At times, the entire open interest in the relevant options was a fraction of what his stated positions required. And when Markopoulos and his colleagues asked around the options desks of Wall Street, they could not find a single counterparty who had ever traded with him. The trades weren't merely improbable, they had left no mark on the world. In May 2000, Markopoulos took his analysis to the SEC's Boston office. On the numbers, he argued, there were only two possibilities. Madoff was front-running his brokerage customers, or he was running the world's largest Ponzi scheme. Nothing happened. He submitted again in 2001. That same year, the doubts even reached print, a trade journal, MAR Hedge, and then barons both published articles openly questioning how Madoff could produce such returns. Noting that Wall Street's professionals privately couldn't explain them, Madoff waved the questions away. The money kept coming. Nothing happened. Even inside Renaissance Technologies, by common consent, the most mathematically sophisticated fund on Earth, executives privately concluded the returns could not be what they claimed and quietly cut their exposure. In internal emails, the SEC itself later obtained during an examination and did not act upon. In 2005, Markopoulos sent the SEC a memorandum whose title has since become famous. The world's largest hedge fund is a fraud, 29 numbered red flags, laying out the impossible returns, the phantom options volume, the secrecy, the strip mall auditor. This time, the SEC's New York office did open an investigation. And now watch closely, because what follows is the single most painful moment in the history of financial regulation. In 2006, Bernard Madoff testified before SEC staff and lied comprehensively under oath. Asked how his trades settled, he told the SEC staff that they cleared through the Depository Trust Company, the central vault that records who owns what in American markets. And he handed over his account number. Understand what that means. Verifying the story required one request to one institution, which would have shown that the billions in client holdings simply were not there. Madoff himself later said from prison that he was astonished. He assumed that the moment they had his DTC account, the game was over. The call was never made. In January 2008, the file was closed, with Madoff registered as an investment advisor and no fraud found. Markopoulos kept submitting further material in 2007 and a final warning in the spring of 2008, months before the end. By then, he had spent nearly 9 years telling the one institution, built to stop it, exactly what it was. The SEC's own Inspector General would later document the full record in a 457-page post-mortem. Between 1992 and 2008, the agency received 6 substantive complaints about Madoff, conducted 2 investigations and 3 examinations, sent in teams that were inexperienced and outmatched, caught him in contradictions and lies, and never once verified his trading with a third party. Every road led to the same conclusion. At almost any point in 16 years, one independent check would have ended it. So the regulator never stopped him. The auditor never existed in any meaningful sense, and the professionals kept the fee machine running. Here is the machinery truth this channel exists to point at. A Ponzi scheme is never really hiding from investigators. It is racing against a number. The day withdrawals exceed deposits. Fake profits cost nothing. Real withdrawals are paid with other people's deposits, so the scheme survives only while new money outruns old money leaving. For decades, Madoff's number never came. Exclusivity kept deposits flowing in, trust kept withdrawals low. The steady returns meant most clients simply let it ride, compounding fiction upon fiction. Then came the autumn of 2008, and the global financial system itself went into a redemption run. That collapse gets its own video on this channel. What matters here is a single side effect. Panicked investors everywhere needed cash and could not sell their wrecked assets, but Madoff never seemed to have losses. He was the one investment still standing, so they drew down the one thing that still paid out. The scheme's greatest selling point, reliability in catastrophe, made it the first place the world went for cash. And the redemption run found the one fund that was nothing but redemptions. Through the last weeks of November and early December 2008, the requests piled up around $7 billion in redemption demands, by Madoff's own account, against a bank account holding a few $100 million. He scrambled for new money almost to the end. And then, on the 10th of December, he did something out of character. He proposed paying staff bonuses months early. His sons, Mark and Andrew, who ran the legitimate trading floor, questioned him. Their father said he wanted to talk somewhere private. And in his apartment that afternoon, by the account in the criminal complaint, Bernard Madoff told his sons that the investment advisory business was a fraud. Basically, a giant Ponzi scheme finished, all of it one big lie, with billions in obligations and nearly nothing left. The sons went to a lawyer that evening, and the lawyer went to the authorities. Let the record state this precisely, because speculation has swirled around this family for years. Mark and Andrew Madoff reported their father to the authorities within hours of his confession, and neither was ever charged with any crime. At 8:30 the next morning, the 11th of December 2008, 2 FBI agents arrived at the apartment. By the agent's sworn account, he said, "We're here to find out if there's an innocent explanation." And Madoff answered, "There is no innocent explanation." He was arrested in his dressing gown. The firm was seized within days, and the 17th floor finally had visitors. What they found rewrote the record books, and it is worth being precise about the two numbers, because both are true and they measure different things. $65 billion, just under it, was the fictional wealth on the final statements. Principal plus decades of invented profits that never existed anywhere except on paper. The real cash losses, money actually deposited and never returned, came to around $17.5 billion by the trustees' reckoning, with some estimates running toward $19 billion. Roughly 4,800 accounts, and behind them victims on every scale. Global banks and hedge funds, but also school teachers, retirees, war veterans, people whose entire retirement existed only as laser-printed fiction. The charitable wreckage was its own category. Foundations built over lifetimes closed their doors. Yeshiva University and the women's charity, Hadassah, counted losses in the tens of millions on their statements. And the Elie Wiesel Foundation for Humanity, created by a survivor of Auschwitz to fight indifference, lost substantially all of its assets, along with the Wiesels' personal savings. The aftermath also claimed lives. A French fund manager who had placed his clients' fortunes with Madoff, and 2 years to the day after the arrest, Madoff's elder son Mark, both took their own lives. Madoff never fought. In March 2009, he pleaded guilty to all 11 federal counts: securities fraud, money laundering, perjury among them, insisting, against all evidence, that he had acted alone. In June 2009, in a courtroom where his victims applauded the result, Judge Denny Chin called the fraud extraordinarily evil and imposed the maximum on every count, to run consecutively. 150 years. It was not a forecast of lifespan. It was a message, a sentence designed, the judge made clear, for symbolic weight. The accompanying forfeiture order was its own monument, roughly $170 billion, the prosecutor's measure of everything that had ever flowed through the scheme's accounts. And then began the strangest chapter. The money started coming back. A court-appointed trustee named Irving Picard was handed the ruin and made a decision that defined the recovery. The statements were fiction, so they would count for nothing. Each victim's claim would be cash in minus cash out. And anyone who had withdrawn more than they deposited had, however innocently, been paid with other victims' money and could be sued to return the difference. The clawbacks were bitter and litigated for years. Imagine learning that your life's investment returns were not merely fake, but legally recoverable from you. But the method worked on a scale no one predicted. The estate of a single investor, Jeffrey Picor, who had withdrawn billions more than he ever put in, returned $7.2 billion, described at the time as the largest single forfeiture in American history. J.P. Morgan Chase, whose accounts had hosted the scheme's entire plumbing for decades, paid penalties and settlements exceeding $2.5 billion in 2014 for failing to raise the alarm. All told, the trustees' recoveries now stand above $14 billion, close to 90% of allowed claims by his accounting, though the figures still move as litigation grinds on. And a separate Justice Department fund has distributed more than $4 billion on top to victims beyond the trustees' reach. Principal, in large part, came back. The decades of imaginary growth never existed to recover. The fates scatter the way they do in these stories. Frank Di Pasquale pleaded guilty and turned government witness, describing the 17th floor's fiction factory in detail, and died before he could be sentenced. David Freeling, the strip mall auditor, pleaded guilty and admitted he had never meaningfully audited anything. 5 long-serving back-office employees were convicted at trial in 2014. Peter Madoff, the brother and chief compliance officer, pleaded guilty to falsifying records and served 10 years, while maintaining, uncontradicted by any charge, that he had not known of the Ponzi scheme itself. Ruth Madoff was never charged and surrendered nearly everything. Andrew Madoff died of cancer in 2014, calling his father's crime, in essence, a killing force in the family. And Bernard Madoff died in a federal prison medical center in North Carolina in April 2021, aged 82, 12 years into his 150. So what does the Madoff machine actually teach? The machinery version, not the morality play. First, in investing, steady is the tell. Real returns breathe because real markets do. The seductive thing about Madoff was never the size of his returns but their smoothness. And smoothness is precisely what honest exposure to markets cannot produce. 7 losing months in 14 years is not a track record, it is a confession. The alarm bells of finance are calibrated backwards in the public mind. We fear the investment that swings and trust the line that never wavers, when the line that never wavers is the loudest alarm there is. Second, trust is not a control, and reputation is not custody. Every safeguard in the Madoff system turned out to be the same safeguard. His standing, wearing different costumes. The audit was a storefront. The regulator checked the paperwork but never the existence of the assets. 6 complaints, 5 examinations and investigations, and not one independent phone call to the vault. And the structure violated the oldest rule in the book. Madoff held the assets, executed the trades, administered the accounts, and printed the statements. No third party stood anywhere in the loop. The lesson for any investor in any era fits in a sentence: verify existence before you admire performance. Third, community is an attack surface. Affinity fraud works because it borrows a lifetime of earned trust and spends it in places trust was never designed to go. The warm introduction, the shared synagogue or club or church, the friend who is already in, these feel like diligence while replacing it. And exclusivity completes the inversion. When admission is a favor, scrutiny feels like ingratitude. The counter is not cynicism about your own community. It is the refusal to let belonging answer a financial question. The men who checked the auditor walked away. The rule held on the 17th floor as it holds everywhere. Nobody audits a privilege. Every year since, smaller Madoffs have surfaced, and the pitch never changes: steady returns. A proprietary method too valuable to explain, and a door that seems hard to get through. The names change, the arithmetic never does. In the end, no investigator beat Bernie Madoff. Harry Markopolos handed the regulator the proof 5 times over nearly a decade, and the scheme outlived every warning. What killed it was the one force no Ponzi scheme survives: a world that suddenly wants its deposits back all at once. In the autumn of 2008, the entire global financial system became exactly that: a redemption run on every bank, every fund, every promise at the same time. And it broke honest institutions and fraudulent ones alike, without distinguishing. How that happened, how the world's real money machine nearly died in the same weeks that its greatest fake one did, is its own story, and we tell it in full. Sources for this account include the criminal complaint, plea allocution and sentencing transcript in the federal case against Bernard Madoff, the Securities and Exchange Commission Inspector General's 2009 report, Harry Markopolos' submissions and congressional testimony, the filings of the court-appointed trustee, court records from the prosecutions of the firm's employees, and contemporary reporting including the 2001 investigations in MAR Hedge and Barron's.